Okay, good morning, everyone. We come to you this morning from CaTS, basically with the community engagement course and the community advisory boards. We do this morning want to welcome you to this conversation. It's about engaging community and research, such that research is very fruitful. We'll start it off with introductions, starting with myself, who would be moderating this session. I'm Daniel Sarpong. I'm director of the Health Disparities Center at Xavier, professor of biostatistics, and I'm excited to be here. In addition to all of that, I direct the CaTS Community Engagement and Outreach Core. So having said this, I will have a wonderful and very dynamic 4 individuals who will be engaged with me this morning on our conversation in terms of how we can facilitate academic and community engagement in terms of research and making sure that research is relevant to the population that it's intended and is designed to serve. And so at this point, I'll pause, and I don't know, we're not going to go in any special order, but I guess I will call on Ms. Haywood if she will start us off, and you guys can jump in.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Haywood. I am the chair for LaShawn at Xavier. I'm sorry. I'm always working, LaShawn, so forgive me. I am the chair for the CaTS at Xavier, and I am the executive director for Louisiana Community Health Outreach Network.
Next. Ms. Collins, you want to?
Lisa Collins. I manage a congregational health promoter program at BCM. I'm also a member of CaTS with Xavier and a lifelong resident of New Orleans, born and raised here.
Mr. McLaughlin, would you introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. Geno McLaughlin. I direct community engagement for Build Baton Rouge, which is the redevelopment authority for East Baton Rouge Parish. I also sit on the CaTS board here in Baton Rouge as well. Do a number of different things, advocacy in the community, whether it's be health, economic, racial, social justice, a number of different issues. So just happy to be here today.
And Ms. Odom.
Hi, I'm Deandra Odom. I am the Healthcare Equity and Cultural Competency Director for Aetna Better Health of Louisiana, and I too serve on the Baton Rouge CAB. I thoroughly enjoy the work that we're able to do. Having come from the health department, I'm excited to be able to get a little bit more into the healthcare equity advocacy piece of this and better integrate my role with the community.
We'll just go around and ask the first, tell us about what it really is you about being on CaTS CAB, whether it's the Baton Rouge or the New Orleans group, and in what way do you think you or your community have benefited or grown by your service on your respective community advisory board?
Oh, I guess I'll jump in just to kind of break the seal a little bit. So I guess to the first point, I really enjoy sitting on the CAB for a number of different reasons. I have even though what I do now is more kind of the redevelopment, I guess, community building space, I look at, I guess, the work of the CAB as also, being aligned with that work. And also it aligns with a lot of the advocacy work that I do outside of any of my professional work as well. I think that we have an opportunity in Baton Rouge and in New Orleans as well to take the community advisement role that we have and actually do some real work with it, right? There are a lot of things that we're actually talking through right now that we're thinking through, thinking beyond ways of just being a talking a board, a place where we, I guess, you know, just help the researchers, and how do we actually go out into the community and bring people into the work that we're doing, right? How do we actually engage people in a very culturally competent way? How do we speak to them and speak to their needs and understand them, and listening first, and then also bring them into the work and tie them into the research work? So I view that as very important, because we know specifically for African Americans, you know, for example, right, we don't participate in research, you know, by and large, right? And we understand a lot of the historical reasons for that. I could probably take up a whole hour telling you what those are, but I know everybody on this call understands what that is. And so how do we break that down? If we know that to be true, how do we break that down? And how can we use the Community Advisory Board to be an advocate both for the people, but also for the research?
Okay. So that sounds real good. I'm certain that your colleagues would want to chime in also and add to what you said, just getting different perspectives.
I guess I'll go next. Mr. McLaughlin said everything I might want to say, but I enjoy being on the CaTS board, and I've been on there for a few years. I enjoy working with people with the same mindset about how to deal with community and how to work with community. I also feel that the CaTS is a way for us to get researchers to understand how to engage community before they even get started. So that's why I'm there, and hopefully I'll stay with CaTS so that I can continue to help to push that. Thank you.
As a person that works with the faith-based communities, we train churches to start health and wellness ministries. So we do that by training lay people or registered nurses how to do that. And so having the opportunity to network with other folks and having the sensitivity of the faith-based community has been beneficial. You know, it's been a win-win, because I'm able to bring the information to the faith-based communities, and I'm also able to link folks that want to do research, that want to do programs, that want to get into the churches, you know, into the faith-based communities and speak with the pastors. I'm able to make those links for folks. So that has been beneficial for us.
And I know, Ms. Odom, you more with now industry of the health system, but also being on the CAB. What is the excitement that you bring?
So for me, when I first started on the CAB, the excitement for me was being able to actually see how things function in the community and how the research correlates to community and then translates to data that we use at the state level. However, now with my being with a health plan or a managed care organization, one of the things that I'm most excited about and that I believe will be most beneficial is really being able to dig deeper into that community and not only see how the CAB and the research can assist our hard to reach or our disparate populations, but also how as a health plan and a managed care organization, we can better serve the needs of the community based on the knowledge that I'm gaining with the CAB.
Okay, so that's really very good. I think that the fact that we, from the lens of the community and also looking at where the community benefits with engagement with the CAB, I guess researchers are wondering what is the benefit to me, because most times they do not see it. But given the fact that you all have interacted with researchers who have come forth and presented their research and given them some input from your lens, the community lens, what are some of the benefits that you see that see of researchers engaging community in terms of when they talk about academic community engaged research?
Well, I think one of the things that, one of the benefits is that oftentimes when we have on our professional hats, it's difficult to look at yourself as a community member. So one of the benefits of the researchers engaging with the community and engaging with the CAB is really being able to hear back what the community feedback is. And kind of like Geno mentioned, for various reasons, particularly the Black community, is hesitant about participating in research. Most recently, we can look at the COVID vaccine. So that's one of the things that has been targeted to African American communities. Well, one of the things that helps researchers is, hey, wait a minute, the community is not happy about that. Let's see how we can better approach it. So what happens is you get more participation from the community, but then the researcher gets a more viable, I guess, if you will, sample. And so we're not just kind of telling them what to do, but engaging them in what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay. And I will agree that there's a lot of misconceptions out there about the vaccine. So using the vaccine example is very important. I'm sure there are other perspectives that the rest would want to give on this subject.
Yeah, I can just share. I know DeAndre is familiar with this. I also lead the community engagement effort for the All of Us research program, right? Which is a national program to try to get over 1 million people involved in this, this research program to really, I guess, hone in on precision medicine, right? Again, though, the same, not unlike the COVID-19 vaccine, anytime you start approaching communities of color, those who have been subject to, healthcare injustice in many ways, we just have a very long history and a very long memory, right? And so with them, for instance, right, it is both first going to potential participants and being honest, right? Having an honest conversation and acknowledging the past, right? And so I think once you start a conversation there from an honest, genuine place, right, of acknowledgement, even if it wasn't that particular organization's fault, which you are, I guess, acknowledging is the hurt and the pain, and also that pain that persists still to this day. And so if you start a conversation there, I think what we tend to do is see over time that the barriers start to break down, and that you'll, obviously for the researchers, you'll get more participation, but also for the potential participants, both now and in the future, what you'll start to see is an uptick in, participation, because you start to break, I guess you start to they start to rid themselves of that, just that distrust that they have. And so that's very important. You need to be talking to people if you want to actually earn their trust. Trust is what it's all about at the end of the day, right? Relationships. If you can make those relationships and undo some of the systemic and historic injustice that's been done, I think over time we'll see it go a long way.
So what would you say to a researcher who says they realize a benefit if they are able to recruit successfully for their project in the context of what we're talking about? What would you say to a researcher?
About how to approach that, or?
Well, I'm just throwing it out there for all of you if you want to comment on it. We're talking about the benefit that a researcher realizes. So in the researcher's mind, if they feel like the way they're gauging their benefit of success is if they are able to recruit, what would you say to that person if they're looking at engagement only in the context of recruitment?
For me, it would be in order to recruit, to get the numbers that you need and you won't, you have to first, and I think it's been said, engage the community before you even start recruitment. You can't wait till you're halfway through your project to go into the community to start getting what you need, because by that time you're pushed and you're not truly engaging. And so you're not truly getting the trust of the community, because you didn't go in before, you didn't talk to them before all of this happened, before you started, and so now they don't trust you. And of course, community, at this day and age, they realize that when that happens, you're using them. So you need to learn how, a researcher needs to learn how to start with community from the beginning and move forward.
Okay. So that segues us way into the next thing that I'm sure it's on everybody's mind that we want to discuss, and that is we've talked about engagement, we've talked about relationship, and the importance of engagement and getting this started much earlier in the process. So how do researchers and community members build this true relationship with one another, the relationship that we're talking about, that trusted bi-directional relationship? So a researcher would say, well, I'm interested, I like what I'm hearing, but how do I go about it? Or a community might say, well, I don't know, how do I approach? Is there any nuggets, any pearls of wisdom that you want to share, both to community and to researchers from your experience, how we can build this true relationship?
Dr. Sarpong, I would say that if at all possible, to get someone that looks like the community, you know, and it's even better if it's someone that's from the community, specifically from that particular neighborhood, because folks who are in the neighborhood, in the area that you want to work with, that particular population, have a different insight into the composition of that population. Sometimes, you know, well, as we know, demographics change rapidly. They're changing by the hour. And so we have written a grant, say a year ago, and now we're implementing it. And yet the demographics have changed, but we don't know. And so having someone that is in the neighborhood, in the faith-based community, you know, in the church, that actually knows what the actual demographics are, would be very, very beneficial to the researchers. So they're getting the more thorough data and coming to a better outcome.
I sort of agree with Lisa, and I'm talking about basic community because I'm not in Lisa's faith-based group. But I think finding someone, like Lisa said, that's in the community would help a great deal. Because there's somebody in that community that's truly respected and can go back and deliver the information that researchers want. I also feel working for academia for a long time and having community people a part of a community association with academia, it is important. It would be great if you can have this CAB on an ongoing basis, so that when you find a proposal or find a grant that you want to do, your CAB people are there so you can go to them with that information and say, hey, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking at, and get their thoughts and their feedback in order for them to communicate with the community that they live and work in.
I see. Ms. Odom, you're about ready to jump in. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I think the other part that, you know, for the community as well as the researcher is keeping the community engaged even after the research. Because oftentimes what happens is we come into the communities and we conduct these research studies, and then we publish the results, and two things happen. We don't go back to the individuals that we recruited and talk to them. And two, the study is published, but it's not published in the community so that we can see what, you know, how our role played. So it doesn't really show a benefit to the community. And then the final thing that happens is it's published in scientific terms. So if you walk with me to my local church, for example, person A sitting on the pew is not going to necessarily understand the scientific dialogue that's published. So it's almost like we recruit individuals, we use them for the samples, we use them to get the research, and then it's like, okay, you're no longer important, I just needed to get my research done. So what the researcher needs is to get their research done, but what the community person needs is to understand how this research benefited them and what was the result. How what was happening? I've participated in research studies, not just with Pennington, but just overall. And more often than not, I never hear from the study again after it's completed. So it's like, okay, let's just say, for example, it is going back to the vaccine. Let's say it is going back to that. I don't know what group I was in oftentimes. I don't know if it truly worked for me. I don't know I don't really know other than the dialogue I had directly with the clinician that was implementing the research. So I think if we could some kind of way circle back around and keep that an inclusive conversation, and like Catherine said, make it an ongoing conversation, not just a, hey, we're here because we need you, but a continuing conversation, I think we'll do a lot better in establishing that trust between community and research.
Right, and the other thing Ms. Odom mentioned is that when this research project is finished and you do your paper, it's always good to have community a part of that paper. They can be an author, they can help to put that together. And I think that piece is a big deal with community. You didn't just use me to do this, but you're also getting my input for what you're writing, so.
Yeah, and I want to say that, I speak from the faith-based perspective, but it's important that all levels be engaged. Particularly in New Orleans, where we have, carnival clubs, neighborhood associations, rec centers, all of those components need to be included when you're trying to do something in community so that everybody feels, included in it, and if at all possible, it would be helpful that the researchers, the leadership on the particular project look like the community. Maybe they're not from the community, but they look like the community. They speak the same language of the community in terms of, dialect, maybe not, particular Spanish, English, but they know that neighborhood, they know the people, the culture, and that makes for better outcomes.
Yeah, really, this is very informative, and I'm learning quite a bit from this conversation. So what I'm getting out of this is we need to have an ongoing CAB at the onset, whether you have a study going or not. If you believe you want to do work in the community, establish a CAB, bring the ideas to them, let them shape the research, let them be able to give you insight as to what the community needs are. The other thing that I took from this discourse is that even after the study is over and we get to dissemination, involve community in the dissemination process, whether it be co-authorship or whether it's translating it into lay summaries so that the layperson on the street can read about the findings and not have to go to the library, to the medical library, to go and get a copy off the shelf. The other thing is also the interpretation. Sometimes, in research, you say something that means that stigmatizes the community that was studied. So being able to have the right context to be able to explain what that data is saying, because sometimes the data, if you don't understand it, might not be able to really articulate, or really your inferences might be off. So, and then the part also that I'm getting out of this is continue to engage, give the results back, let people know what their contributions have been with the study. People might say, well, they found this, and I was a part of that study. I was part of that discovery. I gave of myself for that discovery to happen. So people feel like they've made a contribution. We may not feel as how tangible it might be, but for that person, it means a whole lot. So, these are real good take-home messages that you're sharing. And I, for one, have learned quite a bit from that. I don't know if we still want to explore this a little bit, but this also gets us into basically asking the question, how do we create a bi-directional partnership where there's culture?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead,
but before
Ms.
we
Davis.
move on to the next thing, Lisa made a statement, but I don't know that we have researchers who, all researchers who look like the community. They're not here. We don't have them. But I think that if they can go through some type of cultural sensitivity training, something that they can learn more about the community that they're working with, that would be a big help. Because
I
we just,
agree. I agree.
yeah,
I agree. Yeah, we're not always able to, as we
yeah,
all know, but we have to keep putting it out there. We have to keep putting it out there. As I'm seeing, a lot of organizations have made that decision just, through COVID, and have changed their leadership to reflect the communities that they're working with, and I'm happy to see that. I know it's not always possible,
right.
but
I mean, I think the
for
leadership
us.
being changed to population that's fine. I'm just talking, but at the top, at the very top, the research at the top is not going to look like me all the time. Not going to look like any of us,
Right,
right?
right,
Uh,
right, right.
so so then that leads to they need to learn that you need to go in and have some type of training around culture diversity, whatever. But you need to learn these things about the people that you want to work with. So
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Great point, Catherine. Thank you.
Yeah. But I also think that the point is that there has to be investment in the community. And the fact that there needs to be an attempt to bring some level of leadership. It may be not top leadership, but mid-level leadership. I think it's important because, and I'll share this quick story with you all. I went to a conference in Ethiopia, not Ethiopia, Egypt, and it was a genetics conference. And I met a gentleman who was a researcher from Cameroon. And they were collaborating with investigators here in the United States. And basically, all they did was get the DNA samples and ship them to the US. They had no infrastructure built, and all they had was, well, you all don't have the infrastructure. You all don't have the infrastructure. They didn't even have access to their own data that they have been able to generate. But if they never build the infrastructure, then there would never be a way to groom the next leadership on the continent. So, and I was telling the gentleman, I think also part of this is poor negotiation. Sometimes we feel they're doing us a favor, so we don't negotiate very well. So I think, and I think it sort of leads us into the next thing with the bi-directional. How do we balance or bring about some level of equity? Not equality, but equity. Are you willing to invest in the next generation, train that bright young Hispanic Latino kid or the African American kid, so that maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that person would now be in leadership and champion, activities in their community? Because the literature shows that people come from depressed communities when they get all these professional degrees, become physicians. They go back to those communities and serve because they understand that's their roots. So again, I agree with all the points that have been made, and I think there is no right or wrong answer. But I think we need to have a much broader view in terms of when we're coming into community and looking at assets and even enhancing the assets in the community. It may not be there now, but is there a strategy? And that could be part of the give back. That 5 years from now, we've groomed a generation of folks from the community who now can have either mid-level or top-level leadership. So this is exciting. I'm really learning a lot from this, and this course is great. So I know we use the buzzword, we're creating a bi-directional relationship. Bi-directional relationship. It's got to be a bi-directional relationship between academic and community. So let's help us try and tease out that in the context of when it's culturally relevant and there's this aspect of the give back. So sometimes people might say, and I'll contextualize it a little better. You know, sometimes people say, well, my research is on Alzheimer's, and I'm just picking Alzheimer's. But the folks in the community need something in hypertension. Well, yeah, you could still do the Alzheimer's, but I think there's a way that you can also handle the hypertension situation in the community without giving my own view, which could be a little myopic in some way. I want to hear from you all in terms of how do we do this bi-directional thing. Let's try and untangle it so that everybody understands what that means. And you all not go at the same time. I know you're all excited about it. The question.
I'm trying not to be the first one to speak every time, but I think you made a good point when you said that maybe they're doing it on Alzheimer's and hypertension is an issue in that community. One of the most important things is to determine whether or not that research is even important to the community you're targeting. Because if it's not important to that community, then they're not going to come out to participate. Another thing is, you know, just again, showing the community how this research benefits them as a community. One of the things that one of the research projects that I participated in was the Consume study at Pennington about alcohol consumption and weight loss. Well, in South Louisiana, obviously that's going to be important. Like, how can I have my martini and still not retain a whole lot of weight? Whereas maybe in North Louisiana, which is a little bit more Bible Belt and less liberal to a certain degree, that may not be as relevant of a study. So it kind of reminds me of when we used to do tobacco control, and we would go to the different municipalities about getting some, tobacco-free policies. Well, if that particular community had an issue with, let's just say, their water system, talking to them about a tobacco-free policy was just kind of like, okay, whatever, in one ear, out the other, because I have a more pressing issue. But when you go into the community and you listen to them, hear what their concerns are, hear what they need, and what kind of research does the community want? What do we want to know in the community? What do I want to know about my genetic makeup? Example for myself personally, I'm very interested in cancer research because my mother died from cancer, so that's important to me. But that may not be important to someone that hasn't necessarily experienced that type of loss or that type of medical issue. So I think that making certain that when you're going to the community, that you're not just going and saying, this is the research we're going to do, but you're also saying, what kind of research is needed? What do you need from me?
I agree 100% with all of that you've just said. I just feel that, yes, I'm going to do Alzheimer's. This is my project. This is what I'm going to do. But there's the but, and you said, they need to go and find out. Let's say I'm going to work in Gentilly, right? In Gentilly, is the need around Alzheimer's, or is it the need around hypertension, diabetes, and something else? And they need to find these things out. Now, maybe, again, they can put it all together and use all that information and still get what they need, but the community still gets what they need. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, what's being said is that you have to go in and actually do a real needs assessment, right? That can't happen unless you're actually having true, honest conversation. That you have to remove the transactional nature of those sort of interactions, right? It can't just be about what it is that you're looking to get from a community. It is truly having a conversation void of any sort of outcomes and wanting to know what it is that you value about your community. What is it that you see missing, in your community? What are the things in terms of research, for instance, that might get somebody to participate? But a lot of that is just, it has to be nuanced and it has to feel genuine, right? I do, a lot of times, what I do is what I call relational meetings, and they do not feel like meetings at all. And people who are, I guess, from outside the community engagement industry, that they look at it as if I'm just chilling, not to use slang, but as if I'm just kind of hanging out. But I have those sort of conversations. It might just be at a coffee shop, and to somebody else, that's not a meeting. to me, those are very, very important. Why? Because sometimes that might be my follow-up, right? I might have met them at some sort of, event or something. We had a conversation about, but I'm following up. I'm going back again, re-engaging, finding comfortable spaces to have conversation. And in every conversation, no matter the setting, no matter how relaxed or formal or informal, I believe that you can both make inroads with that relationship, but you can also get some valuable information from individuals.
Go ahead, Ms. Haywood.
Dr. Sarpong, you said, you mentioned something about having, I think it was younger people understand this, so in the future, in the next 5 years, they may want to be a researcher or a great community leader. And I think that plays on both the community leader part and the researcher to actually, for the community leader, possibly identify younger people who are interested or try to get them interested in what's going on within their community. As far as the researcher, it's a possibility that when you go into that community and you have a relationship with some people there, that you can engage with younger people so that you can better get them to understand how this works, what is going on, and get their interest level up. So
what do you say to I have two ideas that comes to mind with this conversation, is that we go back to the Alzheimer's and the hypertension situation. What if the researcher took time to show how maybe hypertension is linked to Alzheimer's and educate folks about the link of hypertension to Alzheimer's, and then say that we want to address, Alzheimer's might not be your problem today, but the fact that we already have high blood pressure issue in this community, we need to find ways to prevent folks from getting Alzheimer's. So that's one idea I throw out there. The other one is that, yes, you can still say, well, I am an Alzheimer's researcher, but I can bring a couple of my folks while we're doing the research to help you best manage your hypertension. So the study might not be about hypertension, but my give back to the community is I'm going to work with my colleagues who have the expertise in hypertension to help you best understand hypertension and how to effectively manage it. What do you all think about those two as maybe models of still trying to do your Alzheimer's research when the need of the community is around hypertension? You're muted.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm good. You can talk.
I tend to take up space, so I'm trying not to.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Of over talking, but I'll share with you. Going back to the All of Us research program that I mentioned previously, right? One thing that I try to, and to Dr. Sarpong's, I guess point. One thing I try to do is connect, efforts that might not be naturally connected, right? And so, while though we want to take part in the All of Us research, which does not have a direct objective per se, right? It doesn't have a direct deliverable, I guess is probably the better way of saying that. But at the same time, like when I'm talking to African Americans, right, I'll say, well, we understand that Black people, are more predisposed to, hypertension, to diabetes, to all of these different things, but we don't know why that is, right? We also know that is because we, by and large, do not participate in research, right? And so we'll never get some of the answers that we're looking for until we actually participate, I metformin, for example, right? Just in my previous background in the healthcare industry, I know that when meeting with individuals in the past, especially Black ones, they'll say, I really don't like, taking metformin if the doctor keeps prescribing that. And so we started to connect though, but we also did not take part in the research when, composing that medication as well. We don't understand why metformin might negatively, react with African Americans versus that of a white person, And so taking part in the research is a critical component to closing that gap so that we can actually understand what's happening.
Education is key.
Yeah.
Any others want to, I know Ms. Haywood, you had a comment on the subject. You want to expound on it or?
No, but no, I don't want to expound on that. But Mr. McLaughlin, I just want you to know you can talk anytime simply because I'm not a big talker here. If you could believe that. I just thought I'd better throw that in
there. Gotcha.
Yeah, so now I think we can look at this issue of why is equitable distribution of funding important and how should it look? I know many at times people are concerned about, funding, and sometimes they say, well, we don't have enough funding or we didn't budget enough for community-related activities. So how does equity of distribution of funding, why is it important, and how, from your viewpoint, how should it look?
I feel to believe that when researchers are writing for funding, that in the beginning that should be a part of, money should be a part of something for community, not just for the research part, your staff. This part goes to wherever, academia, this goes to the university, this part is all what we have left. And I find that they always come back and say, well, we're doing this, but we don't have. That's an all the time statement, all the time. We didn't receive, we don't have enough funding to do whatever. And so that needs to be looked at more. How do we, I feel community, depends on what you're doing, should be compensated for some of their time. Not just, okay, I'm gonna teach you how to take your blood pressure. Oh, that's good. But on the other hand, there are people who truly need some extra compensation financially. And you're working with, I don't want to use the word using, but you're working with people. So you're getting a salary over here, which is great. But they're not getting anything for their time. And then, as Odom said, like she said, and they don't come back and give me any results. I don't know what happened when you did this, this, and this. So I just feel to believe, and that's in whatever. I don't care if you feel that I am sitting home watching soap operas. It is my time, still my time. So, I'm not saying give them hundreds of thousands of dollars, but something. So that's always my soap opera for whatever, when I feel that you're asking people to do something else, to work with you around something.
And I'll just say, it just shows value. We value you. We want to invest in your community. We're not coming here just to take the numbers and run. We want to support you and the programs that you're doing.
So a thought that I had also in terms of the follow-up is maybe the research didn't account for a huge compensation for participating. But let's just say, for example, the research is metformin, and we discovered that metformin is working for the majority of the people in that community that are displaying prediabetes. Well, what can we do to integrate funding to make certain that those community members or those participants still have access to it? Because, okay, it worked. It's beneficial to this community. It's beneficial to your research, but hey, the research is over, the study is over. I know that it works, but I no longer have the funds to continue taking the medication. Okay, so how do we bridge that gap? So when we talk about equitable funding, are we talking about it only as it relates to the research, or are we talking about the long-term impact on the community? Because realistically, there are other things outside of just a $100 check or a $50 gift card, whatever it is your financial compensation may be. Some of your participants may truly want to be able to keep up what they learned during the study, but again, if you're not coming back and given the outcomes or coming back and doing follow-up, I may not know as a community member how I can keep up what I learned in that research.
Yeah, so also what about, and sometimes I know our conversations focus on the individual, the participants, but what about the community-based organization or the faith-based organization that could be a partner in the research enterprise? What do y'all say to that, in terms of still talking about this compensation or equitable distribution of funding?
Well, not to steal Ms. Collins' thunder, because I'm sure she'll speak to the need for faith-based organizations needing funding. When I look at equity, right, let's first define what that word is, right? The difference between equity and equality. Equality is to put everybody on the same, level, but that's starting from where they are. So if we're talking about Black people, right, and we know that for 200, I would probably say 400 years, but there's a 200-year gap to get Black people where white people are, right? Equity actually is investing in Black people more now, right? And so I guess to make this now more about systems and organizations, if we're talking about researchers, and I'm not sure all the rules and whatnot when it comes to what, researchers can do in terms of compensation, but when that is done, right, when the research program is done, is there an opportunity for right, we work with Pennington, right? Is there an opportunity for Pennington to actually now start investing in community organizations, right, that do a specific type of work that actually might tie into their overall objective, right? Again, I'm not sure what all the rules and regulations are, but certainly there has to be some sort of mechanism by which these large research programs can actually fund people who do the work. Much of the work that I do outside of my professional capacity is literally on my own, just passion, right? I do not get paid for it, yet I get up every single day and do things for other people simply because I want to, right? Simply because I know that there is a need that exists. And there are other people who are out there that they specialize in that specific thing, right? I'm always trying to find ways to steer money into, to those individuals because they exist strictly off their passion, but you'll find that, again, many of the larger and even white-run organizations will always find a way to get the funding, and so it's really trying to tie people into the funding and finding ways for researchers to actually be to help solve that.
One of the things that I hear from faith-based communities is they come in, they study us and they leave out. So what they would like to see is that their members or their folks, their neighborhood, folks are employed by the study, whether it leads to temporary or permanent employment would be it is to be determined, but that's one of the things that they would like to see, because I think that's a big, huge investment when you come into a community, whether it be faith-based, whether it's, the neighborhood association, the carnival club, whoever happens to be in that neighborhood, and say, we want to do this research and we want your folks to help me and we're going to compensate them for that. Again, it's not always possible, but it's appreciated when it happens and the relationship, becomes better, closer. And when the same organizations are going back a second time or a third time to do research again, they have that relationship, they have that trust that's been built, and the outcomes are much better.
So I think faith-based or community-based organizations, however we want to look at that, should be written into a grant from the beginning, so that funding for that organization or that however faith-based or that church or whoever is there. It's not an afterthought. I'm going to give you this, but it's already in that grant, so that you're working with this organization and this is what I'm going to give you to help me to do my work. I mean, this is what you're going to get. And I think it should be in from the beginning. So
even in the case where, you know, they weren't brought in, the partners were brought in afterwards because they saw a big need for that partnership. I think that there needs to be some degree of creativity to at least offer some compensation, because sometimes I think the easiest thing to do is we don't have the money.
well, Dr.
This was
Sarpong,
not budgeted in there. Yeah.
yeah, I think from the beginning, researchers know that they can't do this by themselves unless it's something that they're just using guinea pigs in a lab to work with. But if you have to work with community, that is not something that they can do alone, because like Lisa said, they don't always look like the community. And so they need help from a community-based organization or a church or whoever. So
I know time is of an essence and we're wrapping up. So what I want to do is ask, what advice would you give to a researcher who thinks that engaging community is too time consuming?
you're
You want it
not.
off?
Your high point.
You want it off the cuff
Yeah, I
response?
want an off the cuff response.
You're not gonna get what you want. You're not gonna work with. Yeah, you're not gonna get community to do what you need. You're not gonna get the help that you need. So off the cuff, hey, you need to learn how to work with community in order to do the research that you want to do. It may be a little bit time consuming, you know, and a lot of times they're on a time crunch. So that's why I'm always saying you need to go in from the beginning, because if you don't, then your research project is looking at a downslide. It's not going to happen.
I guess my off the cuff, and the first thing that comes to mind, and it may not be the most politically correct response, but at some point you have to determine if this is the field for you. Because if if we're not willing to put in the work that's required to do our job, then sometimes you have to stop and say, is this still the job for me? So if I'm a researcher and I'm not willing to work with the community that I want to conduct research on, then this may not be the type of research that I need to do. And maybe I can still be a researcher. So my advice is maybe, it's not to say that they wouldn't make a good researcher, but maybe human subjects are not their area.
Any others want to chime in before we go to giving folks your take-home messages? Well, hearing none, I guess since we're wrapping up, and like Fred Sanford would say, am I on camera? And then he starts singing, how could I be sure? So at this point, we'll like you all to, in about a minute or so, give what your take-home message is to both community and researchers as it relates to a successful academic community or community academic engaged research. So I'll give each and every one of you about a minute or two to kind of send us home with your words of wisdom.
I'll just say, a couple of things. It's not going to take that long, but just feeling the community needs to feel valued, comfortable, and invested in.
So my take home is that in order to gain the trust of community, all that Lisa just said is very important. The other thing, I think for researchers, you really need to listen to this webinar so you can understand better what's happening.
So my take home, and unfortunately, Dr. Sarpong, you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times as well as Geno. When you consider your research, take off your researcher hat, take off your public health hat, take off your professional hat, and become Jane and John Doe, who live on 123 Sycamore Lane. and remember exactly how you feel as a community member. Because when we leave our professional spaces and we go back to our homes, we are community members. So if we can remember to consider ourselves as community members and not just the professional that we are behind our desk or behind our Zoom, then I do believe that all of us could work together and build those trust and those relationships and have much better research and outcomes than we have ever had before.
Yeah, for me, I always tell people that it starts and ends with trust. And to gain that, you have to be talking to people, right? And so that is the same when it comes to research as well. You have to touch people. If you're not touching people and doing that in a genuine way, you won't get the results that you're looking for. You might get some participation here and there, but it won't be consistent. And so you have to go out on a consistent basis and make sure that you're actually reaching out and touching people, having genuine conversations and finding ways to invest back into them. And they will in turn invest into what you're looking for.
This has been wonderful. This has been very stimulating. This has been very educational. I think I've learned a lot. You all have summarized it so well. I wouldn't even want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So we'll leave it here. And I want to thank each and every one of you of giving of your time, of your knowledge, expertise, and enlightening us in terms of what we can do both as community members, community organizations, faith-based organizations, academicians, researchers, and research enterprises, or even health systems, where we can truly engage community in a more meaningful way so that we can indeed solve the problems. I think that, if we think about it, there have been certain questions, health questions, that we've been asking for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And we're still at it, and we haven't found solutions. So like Einstein said, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, but always expect to get different results, that's insanity. So if we're still asking the same questions, and we still keep figuring out a way to find solutions, and we haven't found solutions, then maybe we need to reframe the question, or we need to change our approach. Whichever one is the most suitable one is in each of us hands. So I thank you, and I wish you well, and y'all have a wonderful and blessed day. Stay safe, and we shall be back again on the next episode of Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
On that note, okay then. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Okay, you too.